I think he's lying.
Is that a gram? New card. What do you think?
Whoa. Very nice. Look at that.
It's very cool, Bateman, but that's nothing. Look at this.
That is really nice.
What do you think?
Nice. Let's see Paul Allen's card. Look at that subtle off-white coloring.
Finally, the Arrowverse is dead. The Arrowverse?
Dead!
After 12 long years. Finally, it's over. The Arrowverse began in October 2012, and on May 24th, 2023, the final episode of the Flash TV show aired, marking the official end of the Arrowverse, and I couldn't be happier.
Nah, I say let it die. Let it die, let it die. Let it shrivel up and come on, who's with me, huh?
Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoy the Arrowverse for what it was because I have been a DC fan for years and I started watching these TV shows around middle school and I pretty much watched them from that point in time to college. To this day, I still remember the first trailer for the Arrowverse TV show, and when they introduced Barry Allen in the same show and released the Flash TV show not too long after that, I was super excited. I felt like as a DC fan, I was eating pretty fucking good when it comes to TV shows. Now that 9 seasons has passed for the Flash TV show, and a handful of seasons have passed for Arrow, and for Supergirl, and a handful of the other shows, I've come to the truthful conclusion that a lot of these shows just took a massive nosedive in quality and storytelling for reasons that is unbeknownst to me. There could be multiple reasons, but for now, I have no truthful idea what fucking happened to the story of these shows. Now, fortunately for you lot, I'm somewhat of a writer myself, and I had taken it upon myself to actually go on this venture of trying to rewrite these CW shows and at the same time try my very best to keep the characters consistent in terms of their storylines, their powers, and their information presented throughout the plot. If you have seen Madvocate's video on the Flash series from seasons 1 to 4, you can understand that there is a many inconsistencies that the show goes through and refuses to correct. And because of his videos, it inspired me to attempt to rewrite these series in a way that's a lot more consistent and a lot more entertaining for the matter. If you haven't seen his videos, I'll link them down below and you can check them out for yourselves. But for this video, we're going to start out by rewriting the season 1 of The Flash. I'm not going to go by episode. I'm kind of going to give it a general synopsis of how I would have rewritten this series entirely. And on that note, let's get started. Season 1, Episode 1 of The Flash, despite being far from perfect, it was a decent introduction into the life of Barry Allen after the death of his mother and the false incarceration of his father. He works at CCPD as their nerdy, always late CSI and is secretly obsessing over the death of his mother and what caused it or who caused it, and of course later on gets struck by lightning because of the explosion of the particle accelerator, giving him the ability to move at the speed of sound and becoming the Flash. But let's backtrack a little bit. One of my major issues with shows like The Flash is the habit that they have of telling the story instead of showing the story. One of the changes I made to the first episode is to cut out the majority of flashbacks that are shown. There aren't that many flashbacks, but the one that shows Barry running from bullies from the very beginning and getting mollywopped and then showing his mom patching him up later doesn't sell to me that he has a very strong relationship with his mother or family in general. Yes, they care for him, but that doesn't sell it to me with just that small little flashback. I believe it would have been more effective to do the introductory monologue, and then where he's flash forward to him being the Flash, and then bring the story back to the start where he's running late to a crime scene when he's an adult, and avoid the flashback entirely. Then, after the monologue, he will finally reach the crime scene and gets chewed out by the police captain. Another change I would incorporate is changing the location of the crime scene and who is there when Barry arrives. The tragedy of Barry's past should be implied, like making the day that he's late the anniversary of his mother's death, or how I would have done it, have the crime scene not too far away from the family home, have him progress from his smiley, nerdy self to being distracted and not being able to focus on the job, and was late because he was visiting his dad in prison. Then, pushing beyond that, after the scene has been done and now Barry has to process the evidence that he found at that scene, he goes back to CCPD and he finished up his work with his colleague and CSI partner, August Hart, which brings me to the character introductions of the show. The supporting cast for The Flash in the first 2 seasons were pretty solid. When it came to later seasons, the cast pretty much fell apart the longer the show got extended. So I thought for the rewrite, the majority of the supporting cast remains consistent, but only changes when their personal stories have ended, or have their lives have changed, or they die, and so on. In my version of the first episode of the first season, the characters that would be introduced like the original, Joe West, Captain Singh, Iris West, Eddie Thawne, August Hart, Doug, Caitlin Snow, Cisco Ramon, and lastly Harrison Wells. And that's excluding the villain, which I will get to in a minute. The reasons why I decided to add people like August Hart, Doug, and Captain Singh to the main roster is because you can make more compelling interactions and character plots with these characters, and instead of it just being the same 3 Star Labs goons like Barry and Joe. And of course with the occasional Iris West and Eddie when you're trying to discuss things like love plots or other side plots you want to introduce, but we're not going to get to that as of yet. Doug is a character I would have introduced is to make Barry's best friend instead of Iris. I was never really a fan of Barry and Iris being best friends at the beginning, or this brother-sister mantra thing like in the comics, so I decided to provide a character named Doug as Barry's new best friend.
But Kadukan, Doug is a character from the comics. Just because you make it a comic accurate story doesn't mean it's going to be better.
Listen to me, you idiot. I understand good and well that's not the case. If you have half a brain, you would understand that Doug, yes, is in the comics, but he gets erased by the Reverse Flash. But that's extra details that I don't need to go into. The reason why I would introduce a character like Doug into the show is because he can be a grounding character for Barry as he grows into the Flash, and he doesn't just have to be from someone like Joe West doing this father-son dynamic. Doug can be a lot more playing field even though he may not have any powers. The same goes for August Hart, because August Hart is going to be his colleague, and over time he's going to grow to become Barry's friend. Because at first, he can be kind of like the Julian like in Flash Season 3. It takes up his role as being his colleague, his partner, and over time becomes one of his closest friends, and become a beacon for him training when he becomes the Flash. Also, I would have made Iris live with her mom rather than living with Joe. In the show, Joe's wife dies later on in the series, but in the beginning she's alive. That's his ex-wife. But what I would have made it where Barry lives with Joe and Joe is living by himself while Iris is living with her mom. This makes it a little bit more different. Instead of just having a brother-sister relationship between them two, they can still have a friendly relationship, and if they do decide to go into a romantic relationship, it's not as weird compared to the brother-sister turned to lovers type beat. Even though it's in quotations, it's still kind of weird. Then moving beyond that, when Barry gets struck by lightning, that's when he gets introduced to Caitlin, Cisco, and Harrison Wells. And then also I would have also introduced another character. I don't know what I would name him or her, but an extra character that would be somewhat of an engineer that worked on the particle accelerator with the main 3 as well. I'll go into more detail about that when I go talking about the villain section of the show. But as of now, Barry meets Caitlin, Cisco, and Harrison Wells in a very basic Central City hospital when he wakes up from his 6-month coma. That's when you understand that there is something different in the world now because Barry has been asleep for 6 months. They introduce him to the concept of metahumans and that they already know of the existence of metahumans, and he is just another one of them, and they didn't know how great of an influence he would be. Later on, he then goes to Star Labs with them, because keep in mind, Barry is still a nerdy dude. He's been a fan of Harrison Wells for a while. He gets invited to Star Labs to actually understand his powers a little bit more. He learns of the metahuman help that they've been trying to provide for people who were affected by the particle accelerator, and they also learn about the people who have been causing pain and suffering throughout the city, even though it may not be as public news, because they don't want to believe that people are running around with superpowers. Harrison then explains to Barry they already have some people already in containment, where they had people like Grodd just contained in a cage somewhere, or evidence of certain areas in the city just going below 0 because of super cold temperatures with unexplained phenomena, which he also tells Barry that there are other metas that they haven't caught yet because they do not have the resources or the ability to catch them because of their abilities. This becomes overwhelming for him, and then he decides to run off to go find the people that he cares about. Iris, Doug, August and tell them that he's awake from his coma and he's ready to get back into action at the CCPD. And then we still get this, similar scenes where he's able to see things move in slow motion, he's able to move faster than the speed of sound, and then tries to go back to work at the CSI and act like everything is normal. And then, of course, from this case from the beginning of the day, he encounters the same person that committed that same crime that's near to his house, and that person has become a metahuman. And this is where I start to divulge into the villain section of this video. One of the major issues the Flash had in the first season is that they had this whole meta of the week type of format, which doesn't work very well when the Flash can pretty much knock out anyone with one hit, or just run really fast and just throw them into a cage or throw them into a cell or put metahuman cuffs on them and just beat them in less than 2 seconds. It's very difficult to write a story that's very compelling around that kind of character if they can just beat everyone in then less than 10 seconds. So, of course, one thing you can do is either you nerf the main character or you buff the villains. In my version, I try to do a little bit of both. I made the villains a little bit different. Prime example, we had the weather meta in the beginning of the series. All he was able to do was to manipulate weather, or in his case, just to make a giant tornado surround him. So then, instead of him just being able to just make a tornado, make him turn into a tornado where his physical body disappears, or make it where he's not being able to be touched on or be intangible. He becomes wind. He moves as fast as wind, so on and so on. It's not very hard to change the powers of certain metas to make them a lot more interesting to go up against the Flash instead of just being one shot killed in every scene. Another example is characters like Bloodwork or Leonard Snarf. Leonard Snarf, for the most part in the comics, is just running around with a cold gun. We can change it to where he's kind of like Mr. Freeze. He has the ability to turn everything around him cold. The air turns cold or drop the temperature below 0. And if you want to connect him to the particle accelerator explosion, you can make it where the cold gun kind of merges with his hand when the particle accelerator exploded. You can make it the same with Heat Wave, or make it the same with a lot of these villains that was introduced. Because one of the major problems is that a lot of them just are very easy to beat for Barry, which makes the fights very boring and makes him do these dumbass decisions like fighting multiple Nan and not using his super speed in less than 2 minutes. You are fighting 1,000 people. You were able to beat them in 2 seconds. Stop being stupid. But in my villain section, I also said I mentioned there's going to be a 4th member in the Star Labs group, which will bring me to the main villain, the Reverse Flash.
It was me, Barry.
The Reverse Flash, in the first season of the show, killed Harrison Wells that was coming in to actually go unveil the particle accelerator, but after he got stuck in the past, he kills that Harrison Wells, takes his face, and then does the particle accelerator earlier than it was supposed to be. But something about that plan was very off to me when I was watching throughout the show. Now, granted, the Reverse Flash is always supposed to be a relatively complicated character. He does a lot of jacked up stuff throughout the timeline, and half of it doesn't make any sense. This is kind of my way of trying to make sense of his story. I'm taking a piece out of the Flash comics and taking a piece of that origin and placing with the Reverse Flash. Instead of Eobard Thawne coming back in the past and killing Harrison Wells, he kills a different character. I was going to do it more of like an engineer character. A character that was working close to someone like Ronnie when the particle accelerator exploded and when Ronnie died, and he's responsible for the particle accelerator exploding in the first place. And this engineer character, to a certain degree, is a little bit antisocial or a little bit distant towards Barry. He doesn't hate him as of yet, or she doesn't hate him as of yet. It's just that their interactions are few and far in between and have a small sense of passive aggressiveness to it. After Barry first gets his speed and is running around and he's training with Harrison, Caitlin, Cisco, and the new engineer person, they are kind of forced to build a relationship with each other because Barry wants to use his speed for good. Soon enough, Barry gets really good at using his speed. Like really good, really fast. He was able to stop fires in seconds. He beats a lot of metas really fast. In fact, there's a lot of well-known metas that are already caught. But then there's one meta that he can't seem to catch. A red blurry character that he really can't seem to get close enough or catch up to. And he looks like he has similar powers to Barry. Soon enough, Barry gets desperate because he can't catch this meta. And this meta is causing mayhem everywhere. This meta is robbing banks, hurting people, killing people in many different ways, and it almost seems random. Soon enough, Cisco makes the velocity serum, and then Barry uses it for the first time to actually try and increase his speed to catch this person. And he almost succeeds. But that person understands good and well that he's artificially increased himself. And that person said, look, you're not going to be able to catch me with that level of speed. And you can't do it with shortcuts. Character arc I was going for is that from the beginning of the episode 1 to episode, say, 10, Barry's built a very large, arrogant personality because of how easily he's able to beat these metas and put them away and lock them away. And he's enjoying getting the glory of being a hero. Yes, he's still kind, he cares for people that he cares for, but he's still, to a certain degree, there's a level of arrogance to himself. He's cocky. His guard always seems to be down. But then this one meta just taps in and decides to start taking things over and makes him work harder than he's ever done before. Barry could possibly actually lose lives. And this character actually goes towards his friends and family and realizes that this Flash character is trying to take away his fun. Then, not too long after that, this blur reveals to Barry, I am the Reverse Flash, or I am the Flash but the Reverse. Same kind of line that you had seen in the show. Because Barry realizes that this person is responsible for the death of his mother. He makes it his number one priority to hunt this person down. No matter how many other metas out there, he even becomes a little bit more harsher to metas who actually who are no real threat to people in general and are just doing little petty crimes. He becomes a little bit harsher. And then soon, the team realizes that Barry's shifting into a direction that they don't want to see him turn into. And that's when these other characters try to bring him down. Doug does that, August does that, Iris does that, Joe does that. And then they build the relationships a little bit stronger. Then, boom. The Reverse Flash strikes again. He creates time remnants and captures multiple people that are related to the Flash, or he suspects that are related to the Flash. He captures Iris, Joe, August, and Doug. 4 people that he cares for deeply and is threatening to kill all 4 of them. You would think that Barry would have to choose to pick which one he wants to save, but no, he saves all of them without any issue, with little to no problem. And then he chases down the Reverse Flash, but he just can't reach him. He's just right behind him. He's just itching to get so close to him, but it's just a little bit out of reach. And the Reverse Flash just laughs in his face. And they are both running faster and faster and faster, to the point that you can see that the environment around them starts to revert back. Again, the Reverse Flash laughs in his face and then just zooms away from him because he knew good and well that he could run so much faster than Barry in that moment. Barry has inadvertently ran back in time, but doesn't know how far back. Now, this is just for the general interactions that Barry would have with the Reverse Flash. As for the Reverse Flash's general plan, yes, he wants to go back home. He wants to go back to his own time. But at the same time, he wants to be able to adjust the time just enough to where he is the hero. He still wants to make Barry Allen suffer, and hopefully just because of the changes he makes now, it actually makes his life better as he goes back. Because one thing that the Flash TV show didn't really fully explore is that the Reverse Flash is just pure evil. He is evil, but then they made him kind of comically evil. Not so much where he's evil in a way where he's just doing petty things just to get what he wants. He admires the Flash. You want to actually make him have some form of feeling of admiration towards Barry, even though he's trying to hunt him down and kill him. So if I were to rewrite that entire character in general, I would have added a lot more admiration towards Barry. And this engineering character at first is distant and slowly but surely becomes invested into Barry's life and makes him the best version of himself that he can be. The Reverse Flash is supposed to be a foil to Barry. The goal is to foil this man's plan, but I never have any intention of killing the Reverse Flash. One of the major changes I did in the season 1, in terms of the finale, I wouldn't have written Eddie to die. Eddie would still be alive after that season. How I would have written it, the Reverse Flash actually attempts and actually successfully kills Barry at the end of the season. But when he is about to kill Barry, he starts to fade out of existence, understanding that his connection to the Flash is crucial for his existence in this world in general. So he lets him live and runs off, and he decides to fight for another day. And I didn't say this before, the metas that Barry encounters throughout the season are just ploys for the Reverse Flash's plan. They are kind of working with him, and the Reverse Flash promises them power in order for them to accomplish his goals, getting back to the future and killing the Flash. They are not just meta of the week who are just robbing banks and or have tragic past. Some of them can have them, that's fine. We want them to be compelling villains, don't get me wrong. But they are characters who are being trusted by the Reverse Flash to follow his plan to a T, or to do what they need to do to get to the Flash to a point where he can get him back to the future and killing Barry, and then becoming the new hero of Central City in the future. And just like that, that's the majority of the season, how I would have rewritten it in my own words. I understand that I didn't go too much in detail, and honestly some of it's a little bit surface level, but this is just how I wanted to actually incorporate this type of information, and it was going to take me a while to actually do a real detailed video on something like this. If you would like me to do a real in-depth write down of how I would have actually rewritten the entire season, and I maybe start off with the Arrow instead of the Flash, however you want to do it, leave the suggestions, I'm open to it. But I do hope you enjoyed this little video I made for the rewrite of the Flash. I do enjoy the Flash for what it was, but of course it's not a perfect show. It's your boy Katakan, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Business don't play. On point when it comes to the anime. Jack and Daxter, ayy, let's go. The ultimate heroes, don't stop, we on the road. Karukan. Yeah, welcome to the channel.